Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. So I saw this on the internet, and I apologize for not giving credit. But somebody said, everybody starts somewhere. Is JJ Redick supposed to go to the G League? A lot of these guys just don't want to coach college, the NIL. They just don't want to deal with limitations, NCAA. Is JJ Redick, is he a bad idea for the Lakers? I mean, you think Budenholzer would have taken the Lakers job and LeBron would have bought in? They couldn't get him out of town fast enough, and he had a title in Milwaukee. Giannis wasn't a fan. Is JJ Redick a terrible choice? Or are we overstepping that everybody starts somewhere? Where's he going to start? He's rich. He's not going to the G League. He's not taking that job. Jason Kidd, first experiment, not good. Now he's established himself. I mean, what is your take of JJ Redick, who people are getting gobbled up, could be head of the class now for the Lakers?
Yeah, so the experience thing doesn't matter as much to me for a couple of reasons. One, it's the classic like corporate ideology where like you're constantly towing the line between rewarding experience versus rewarding talent. And like there's always a fine line between like, oh, well, this guy's been doing it for 8 years, but it's like, yeah, but is he mediocre? Because that's the other question here. This guy, if JJ happens to have the talent for it, if he happens to have the basketball IQ or whatever for it, then by all means make the move. And so much of that depends on how he's acting behind the scenes in the interviews, if they go through an interview process. But the second piece of it is you can counteract a lot of the lack of experience with just putting experienced head coaches on his staff. So you can address that by just giving him a really good assistant coaching staff. As far as I'm concerned with JJ Redick, like when it comes to the Lakers, what I'm really looking for is somebody that holds players accountable, because I look at them as a defensive-minded team anchored by two big athletic forwards in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Just look at around the league. When the Lakers won, they won when they defended. That was always their bread and butter. They made it to the Western Conference Finals last year as a defensive-minded team. They lost in the first round this year as an offensive-minded team. Going back to 2020, they won when they were a defensive-minded team. So I'm really interested in somebody that's going to hold them accountable. And I don't really know if JJ's willing to do that with LeBron. That's going to be something that is going to have to be flushed out in the interview process. But I'm not concerned about the experience, simply because if JJ's got the talent, he's got the talent, and they're going to anchor him with experienced NBA coaches that will help him navigate the 82-game regular season. And honestly, like it's really just going to be about like a collaborative effort between LeBron James and JJ Redick to kind of identify what the strengths and weaknesses of the roster are and go from there. It's really hard. Honestly, Colin, I wonder what it's like for you covering the NFL too. Like it's really difficult with coaches, especially new coaches. We're not there for the interviews. Like with a player, I can go look at tape and I can get a really good feel for what he's good and bad at. But like with JJ, it's like, well, what's his philosophy going to be? What are his core principles that he's going to build the team on? Like, is he going to continue the 5-out offense they were running out of Darvin Ham? Are they going to run something different? What are they going to do something different defensively? It's so hard to say because we're not in the room for those interviews. But if JJ interviews well and they give him good assistant coaches and he's got the talent for it, I absolutely think it could work.
Well, I mean, Duke kid, you listen to the podcast. He's a thoughtful guy. To me, it's experience is funny. It's creating the volume or working for years at ESPN or Fox Sports. Managers have come to me and said, "Hey, listen to a tape," or "What do you make of this guy?" And my take is, if you've never done network, who cares? Like, we listened to your tape and we're like, yep, he's ready to go. Okay. You didn't have to be somewhere. We thought you would be here. So it's Jerry Seinfeld was speaking at Duke. He had a commencement speech and he had a great line. He said, having stuff is nice, becoming stuff, or having stuff is nice, becoming something is really more important. And becoming something is misses, it's swings, it's an ascension. In every job I've ever had, I was a little over my skis for the first 6 to 8 weeks. Like, I'm bailing water here. I'm trying to catch up. I had a friend once that got a job at Google, and she was like, I literally, 6 weeks in, I'm like, oh, I'm dumb. And this is a full of smart people. I'm too dumb to work at Google. And she goes, then the light goes on, you start clicking. And then like 6 months into it, you're like, okay, but it's like, it's okay. Darvin Ham learned on the job. If you're smart in any industry, you'll figure it out. Like a lot of this stuff with coaching is like I heard Frank Vogel, some complex defensive stuff. Beal didn't really buy in. Booker was close to an assistant coach, much closer than he was Vogel. Kevin was fine, but Kevin's Kevin at this point. And it was like Vogel just he didn't resonate with all the guys in the room. JJ Redick, if LeBron buys him, will resonate with everybody in the room. So my take is you start somewhere. If you get LeBron, there is some credibility, like with Jason Kidd. Like there is credibility player to player that JJ has. And I think it's kind of unspoken, but kind of the middle-aged, guy that didn't play. I always think you go into a locker room and about half the room is like, if the star doesn't buy into it, half the room's not buying into it. Maybe that's cynical, but I think everybody would buy into JJ Redick.
Well, it's like Micah Nori from the Timberwolves, or I can't remember his name, that assistant from the Celtics who just got signed by the Charlotte Hornets. It's like if you bring in an assistant, it doesn't matter how much he's been grinding in the film room. Doesn't matter how much he impressed the previous organization. He's got to be able to look at LeBron and be like, hey, man, I need you to do this. And LeBron's got to be like, okay, and not only that, but I'll hold the rest of the team accountable to help them along the way. And so I do agree. That's the gravitas piece. And by the way, that's why they hired Darvin Ham. They thought Darvin Ham would be able to bring some of that like real gravitas to the
Yes.
situation. The thing with JJ is you got to acknowledge the risk, because you're right. Like they let Darvin Ham learn on the fly. And he didn't really start making huge mistakes until this season with the roster when he was like leaning into Cam Reddish. We've gone over it. But like he made too many mistakes. And then the Lakers had a situation where they looked at the urgency of their situation and said, we have to make a move. And so I just hope that the Lakers front office and ownership understands that if you do take JJ, there is a risk. And even though I believe he could do this well, especially with good experienced staff behind him, anytime you go for a first-time head coach, there's what if he's just really bad at in-game adjustments? What if he's just really bad? Like we don't know what it's going to be like. We're going to find out over time. And so that's where let's say the alternative, let's say they were to get like a Kenny Atkinson, for instance. Like Kenny Atkinson is more of a known commodity. He might be a higher floor, but like maybe you don't get some of the upside you get if you get a freak talent. To your point, Steve Kerr. Like Steve Kerr is regarded as one of the best coaches in the league. I think he's the second best coach in the league behind Eric Spoelstra. Like that was a risk signing Steve Kerr. By the way, Steve Kerr was radical. He came into a Mark Jackson led team that was spamming pick and roll, and he said, "Hey, Steph Curry, we're taking the ball out of your hands. We're going to lead the league in passes. We're going to run this motion ball and player movement offense." And I'm sure there were moments in training camp where it looked ugly. And I'm sure there were moments where the front office was looking down like, oh, this is weird. Like we just went, two great playoff runs in 2013, 2014, just having Steph run spread pick and roll. So like, this is funky, but then it works. And now Steve Kerr is regarded as one of the best coaches in the league. So like there's upside to going with the JJ, but there's also a risk. And so for me, I'm okay with that risk because I don't really think there's any candidate out there that's a home run anyway. So I think there's
Right.
risk all around to begin with.
Yeah, and I also think you have to, because the league is so player driven, you have to be more patient. Like, in football, it's really owner, coach, GM driven. So there's no excuse for a coach to say, I can't get the room. I can't get the room. Just cut guys. If you can't get the room, you're never going to be a good coach in the NFL. In the NBA, international soccer, where you have these Ronaldos and LeBrons that are literally, I mean, they're almost above the sport. They're these iconic figures. It is harder to get that attention. It is harder to get the buy-in. You hopefully get a Tim Duncan, I mean, I think sometimes we forget that Phil Jackson had replaced Doug Collins. Michael liked Doug. Doug's really intense, and there was some combative nature to his personality, but Doug Collins and Michael mostly worked. That was the first time Michael got real buy-in from Doug, and he got real buy-in from Phil. Phil's considered, the Zen master, the better coach, but part of it's buy-in. But I think LeBron has to also acknowledge, when Michael was in a prime for both Collins and Phil, like LeBron's not there anymore. And I do think when he was completely unselfish for the 15 years in his prime, he could have scored 12 to 15 points more every game he
Mm.
played in. Now he can be a little, he looks for soft spots in the defense that he can manipulate, smaller players that he can drive to the basket on. You've talked about this, is that I think LeBron gets a little selfish now where it's more about legacy and production. Is that I think it's time to step back. I'm not denying he's a top six player on any night, but it does feel like a little bit with LeBron, he's gotten a little selfish where it's like it's okay to acknowledge is you can't literally, even if you're great, you're not guaranteeing anything in this league. This is the West. It's packed. You could be a playing team. And I know you know LeBron better than anybody, his game. But I do feel like with LeBron, he's a little more of a taker than a giver now. In turn, not just assists, but he's seeking production sometimes to maintain. And I think it's time to step back. I think he should be a two on a team.
I think you're
Am I
I know, I
nuts?
think you're absolutely right. I mean, this was actually kind of a little bit of a subplot over the last two seasons, more so last year than this year because LeBron was so good this season. But like, for the record, I don't think it's legacy. I think it's confidence. Like, I think LeBron still thinks he's the guy, you know? And so I think a lot of
Yeah.
times, like, LeBron confronts a basketball problem. Like, okay, we're in this slow down basketball game. I need to get something going for my team offensively. That means give me the ball and then I'm gonna, play basketball surgeon. Bring this guy up. I'm gonna get a switch. I'm gonna attack this smaller player. Or, oh, I want to pick on Jokic and pick and roll. So we're gonna bring Anthony Davis up to the screen. But one of the things that I noticed over the course of the last couple of years is LeBron almost confronted every basketball problem with him having the ball in his hands. And there is
Right.
something to be said about, like, even though LeBron on the ball is still a very effective form of offense, it's not the same as it used to be. And specifically with Anthony Davis, I actually do think that LeBron would benefit from leaning more on Anthony Davis offensively over the course of the season. One, to build
Yeah.
up Anthony Davis's confidence so that when they get into some of these situations where they need to lean on it, like, perfect example of this was game 2 against Denver when they blew the 20-point lead. It was LeBron and AD were picking on Nikola Jokic in ball screens. And then Michael Malone made a very smart adjustment. He moved Aaron Gordon onto Anthony Davis so that they could switch the LeBron AD pick and roll. And then LeBron, instead of going, hey, Aaron Gordon's on AD, let me just keep feeding AD against Aaron Gordon. Instead, he thought, I can beat Jokic in ball screens because I'm LeBron. So now I'm going to bring Rui up to the screen because Jokic is guarding Rui, and I'll start to pick on Jokic. And the Laker offense fell apart. And so, like, I think LeBron made the bad read because he was thinking I'm LeBron James, but it's not I'm LeBron James. It's I'm 39-year-old LeBron James. So maybe I should go to this other guy who made 14 straight shots earlier in the game. Like, maybe I should go to him instead. And so I think you're right. Like, I think in general, and this is something I think that the Lakers, from an organizational standpoint, hiring a coach and as they approach this offseason, they need to actually give a clear ball handling option that's not LeBron, so that LeBron doesn't have to feel like he needs to approach every problem by him playing LeBron ball out above the break. And the big guy that I'm looking at, and I want them to go after DeJounte Murray. I don't know if you saw today, but in the draft lottery, the Hawks got the number 1 overall pick, which which
I
is
saw
which is
that. Yeah.
super interesting because, like, I would imagine they're going to look at that as let's rebuild around Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. And so I think they'll probably look to move DeJounte Murray this summer. And he's one of those guys where, like, DeJounte was really good in the play-in games and really good down the stretch of the season. He can really beat people off the dribble. He's an excellent point of attack defender. That's the kind of guy where, like, you can actually put yourself in a situation where you have because as good as Austin Reeves is, you kind of only want to lean on him. It's better that he can go in spurts. You don't want to lean on him
Well,
for big doses.
I saw if you look at DeJounte Murray's numbers when Trae Young didn't play, like it's a little
Oh,
Jalen
yeah.
Brunson without Luca. You're like, oh no, he could be a one in a bad team or a top. I mean, like when Trae Young didn't play, there were like 30% elevation in assists, 25%. Like I don't remember the exact numbers, but I did a rant on this and I was like, I mean, you watch him, he's obviously explosive. You can see that. But it's like we did this with Brunson. You know, you're like, well, he's kind of a two to Trey, and it's like, no, maybe they're 2-1s. The numbers when Trey doesn't play, DeJounte's numbers move up, and his efficiency gets better. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, to put it simply, the Luka Trey, like heliocentric, do everything player. It is difficult to be the number 2 for that guy. We can at least admit
That's
that.
right.
If anything, it's like a testament to Kyrie, because like Kyrie's the kind of guy like in game 3 or game 2 who can score 8 points and still dominate the game as an excellent defensive player and passer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like it is difficult to be in that role. And DeJounte Murray in particular, like he's a guy that like he can really dance with the ball, beat people off the dribble and make stuff happen. And so like if he's and what no one ever said about DeJounte Murray is he's Klay Thompson. Like he's not going to stand out on the wing and just catch and shoot threes all game. And so like
No.
it actually makes a lot of sense. I actually look at that as if I was the Lakers this summer, I'd look 2 routes. Through the trade, I'd look for DeJounte Murray. Through free agency, because they'll have their mid-level exception that they can use every year, I would target a real center, like an actual big center that can play next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis and give them a big look. I think if they do that and Jared Vanderbilt gets healthy, they all of a sudden become a much more physically imposing team with a lot more ball handling because of DeJounte Murray. Like I actually think that there's if they nail this summer and the head coach hire works out, I think there's a small opportunity for them to do some damage next year. But yeah, like the JJ Redick piece, I really do think that it's just as good as any other option out there. It's not like there's some slam dunk home run option. And so I kind of think as long as he nails the interviews and they put the right staff around him, it could work.
Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight. As always, great stuff.
It's good to see you, man. Looking forward to next week.